YouTube.
Do you have the link for your YouTube channel? Maybe we can share that out so people can start watching the replays.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Okay. So we're live on YouTube and we're recording. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Garvin, the Story Architect. Welcome to day 2 of the Senior Heart Song Summit. We have been really blessed to have some wonderful presenters and blessed to have Jackie Bailey be our next presenter. I am really looking forward to hearing Jackie speak. Jackie and I met through a networking group sometime in the last year. And one of the things that I was grateful to be able to do with her was to help I think it was actually a whole grade of students, 5th graders, at a elementary school in the Seattle area of Washington. And
is it me or is Steve
express themselves and to be the amazing messengers that we all have the potential of being. And so it's no coincidence that Jackie's speech is entitled From Voiceless Victim to Master of Message. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our Master of Message to share her message with us.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And I would really like for everyone to be on video because I'd like for you to come back with me several decades. So if you would join at some point, I'd appreciate that because I want you to be with me back in my room. I'm 10 years old. It's the middle of the night. And suddenly I'm awakened because I hear his ankles cracking in the hallway outside my room. Please, not again, not tonight. I tuck my blankets in really tight around me because I'm determined not to make it easy for him. After it's over, he says, like always, don't you tell anyone. I never did. During those years of my youth, when my innocence was taken, so was my voice. Almost like Ursula from The Little Mermaid, reaching in to Ariel's throat and pulling out her voice. That's what it felt like for me as a child. Have you ever been voiceless, figuratively? Have you ever felt repressed? Felt that you couldn't speak your mind? Perhaps out of fear? Or perhaps just to keep the peace? In this day and age when politics is all the rage and everybody has their own side and opinion, it's easy to feel that you can't really share what you want to say because you're going to probably offend somebody. It's that sort of repression that as a child will change who you are. As a child, I was not allowed to tell, and many people who have also been victims of abuse will tell you that it's the silence that is the most damaging part of the abuse. And it was for me. I was a voiceless victim of an older brother. That was a chronic situation. There were other abusers in my life, but that was someone I lived with. And that was someone I could not avoid. Being voiceless kept me from feeling comfortable and confident in any social situation because I was always afraid I might say something I wasn't supposed to. I might break that silence accidentally, and ooh, what would happen to me? In fact, as a child, wasn't ever sure that it was safe to break that silence. There were times when I would yell at my brother with my parents present. I would say, "I hate you." And I would get in trouble. I would be grounded for using my voice. And I quickly learned that I needed to just stay silent. There wasn't anyone to tell, and I wasn't sure that what was happening to me, because it always happened at night, in the middle of the night, that it was actually happening. What if I was dreaming that? If I was dreaming that, I'm a horrible, terrible person to dream such horrible, terrible things. And with that comes the shame. With that comes the fear of embarrassment and humiliation and hateful feelings about yourself. So I kept that silence. It wasn't actually until I was a grown woman, married with two very young children, when my brother had a child. In fact, he had a daughter. And almost from the moment she was born, my world turned upside down. I went into this emotional crisis because I knew that if I continued to keep that silence, I was going to be held somewhat responsible for what was going to happen to her. And yet, if I broke that silence, I had everything to lose. Everyone would see how truly ugly I was. My husband would not want to stay married to me. If they didn't even believe me and I was touted as crazy, maybe they'd take my kids from me. There was a lot at stake. And for years, I struggled with what to do. And of course, it began to truly destroy me. And it began to destroy my marriage and relationships, and people from afar would notice, there's something that Jackie's not at peace with. But of course, no one can truly guess what's going on in those types of situations. So it wasn't until I realized that I loved my children more than I hated myself, and knew that if I killed myself, which was what I was contemplating, that there would be no one there to care for my children and to guard them and keep them safe from the same fate I had endured. So I began to use my voice to tell. And I realized that I deserved to be heard, that what I had to say was important, that what I had to share would actually and literally save someone's life. As I began to break that silence and other family members began to learn about what had happened to me and the danger that my niece was in, they began to be very protective of her. There were some members of the family who didn't believe me, but those who did were determined to keep her safe, even if they didn't know the whole story. And so it wasn't actually until 30 years later, I'll skip ahead really quickly, 30 years later, when that niece finally learned about her father's past, never knowing, because she came to me and she said, "He never ever hurt me. In fact, I always wondered, why couldn't I be alone with my dad? Why wouldn't anybody ever let me stay the night at my dad's house?" And now I understand, Aunt Jackie. I understand. And she said, "You saved me from that. Thank you." I throw that in there because I want you to realize how important it is to do the right things, even though we may never know the outcome of those things, or we may never know for years and years and years. Getting back to my story then, I did the right thing and I used my voice to finally break that silence. It was not easy. It was painful. But breaking that silence and using my voice was the first step toward my ultimate healing process. And when I began to see a counselor to heal from this chronic, lifelong abuse, the first question this counselor asked me was, "Do you think you can forgive?" It was laughable. Forgive? Are you kidding me? You might as well just ask me to pick up a semi truck and lift it over my head. It was ridiculously impossible to even envision that forgiveness was ever possible for me, because I was still under the mindset that he didn't deserve that, not realizing that it was really about me. But she said to me, "Jackie, you don't have to forgive in this lifetime. But if you aren't working toward it every single day, then you will never fully be able to heal." She was so right. And I not consciously worked toward it, but I consciously worked toward healing. And that brought with it, little by little, the ability to let go in order to someday forgive. And it was probably 15 or 20 years after that silence had first been broken and everyone knew, that my husband asked me one day, "Jackie, do you feel that you've been able to forgive your brother?" And I said, without hesitation, "Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, I don't have any pain. I don't have any anger. I don't have any thoughts of ill will toward him. In fact, I wish him the best." And then he asked another question. "Well, honey, do you think he needs to know that?" Hmm. I guess I need to use my voice for something else. There's another step that my voice needs to be heard in. So I flew back to where I was raised, which was 1,500 miles from where I was living at the time, with the sole purpose of facing that brother and saying those three magical words from my own voice: "I forgive you." I didn't realize it at that moment that I was holding the key to his prison cell. You see, all those years that I was his voiceless victim, sometime the tables had turned. And there had been years now when I had actually been the one who was keeping him as a victim of himself. I quickly learned how unable we are to truly progress unless we are forgiven by those who need to forgive us. Because his life was a mess. And when I uttered those three words to him, he immediately changed. He was free and he could take a different path in life because he'd been let out of that cell that he had put himself in. And as many times as I tell this story, there's always someone in the audience who gets angry at me because they can't imagine how a monster such as that should be worthy of forgiveness. And like I said, there were times when I thought the same thing. But to truly heal, I was working toward that, and I have truly healed because I used my voice, the voice that had been kept from me for so long, is now being used to help children find their voice. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I invite you to come on video because I want you to engage with me a little bit about ways that we can pull from you your voice. It's possible, even if you're not a victim of abuse, although statistics would say that several of us here are, but even if you're not, there's likely a part of you, a part of your voice that has been repressed. It might just be that you feel unworthy to have success. It might be that you don't feel that you're doing your mission, or what is your mission? Maybe you don't even know what your purpose is, and that can be stifling to your voice. You want to speak up, but what would you say? Many of my students have actually said similar words like that to me, that I don't really have any problems in life. I don't have any special story to share. But that's not true. Every one of us has had experiences in life that can and do inspire other people when we share them. So I would like for you to consider a question, and I'd really like for you to answer the question. First is, what is your greatest moment of success? Your greatest accomplishment? You had to think about that. Usually in my classes, I ask for 3 examples of your greatest accomplishments, but for the short period of time that we're together, I want you to consider, what is your greatest accomplishment? And it doesn't have to be award-winning. It doesn't have to be a trophy or a title. It could simply be a time when you met your own expectations and you felt on top of the world because of something you worked hard for, something you created out of the blue that now has sentimental value or real value for you or for other people. It could be an act that you took for someone else and inspired them to do something differently, or to feel something differently, or to keep from doing something dangerous. So I want you to think about that question, and it's okay if you put it in the chat, but I'd really like you to use your voice today and share it with us with your voice. I'd like to hear your voice. So, Steve, you put something in the chat. Would you mind telling us about your greatest accomplishment?
Well, it's a little bit like yours, where it was safe for me to keep the stories that I enjoyed in books that other people had written. And I have some childhood trauma similar to yours, just different. And part of the difference is I don't remember any of it, other than someone once used the analogy that that you don't have to be there when the burglar breaks into your house and takes all your stuff in order to know that your house has been burglarized. Mm-hmm. Which has helped me to kind of make sense of what happened to me. But about that time, I started to go inwards and close off the world and always tried to have the right answers, to be when I spoke, which was rare, to be the one with the right answers, to be the smart one in the class, that type of thing. But I never really, there was a very big part of me that had died, honestly. And ironically, it didn't come to life until after I had my own struggle with suicidal ideation and planning and so forth. That when I realized I did not want to any longer suppress who I am and suppress my story, and to bring it out, to find ways to be the voice for for myself, for other people, for now, if anybody's seen my Facebook post in the last week or month, to help my oldest son find his voice, that there are so many pains and sorrows that we struggle with. And if we keep them suppressed, we keep them buried underneath, protective layers, we just wither. In order for us to, it's kind of like, if you put a bag over a plant, the plant's going to die, because it doesn't get any light. And, same thing with us. When we don't share who we are, if we don't share the story that we have inside, when we don't share our message and our truth with others, then, a big part of us dies. And so my journey of taking those layers off and being more vulnerable and more open with my experiences has definitely been a process. I mean, I went 6 years without talking about it at all. And now it's kind of funny. It's almost like you can't stop me from talking about it.
I love it.
But it's just I think we all have a story that we either have to tell about something that happened in the past, or a story that we want to be telling in the future that we haven't given ourselves permission to create. And we can, take the tape off and start sharing, start creating that story little by little.
So here's what I heard Steve say. That his greatest accomplishment has been manyfold. One is that he's been able to begin healing process of his own childhood abuse. He tells me that he has helped his son to find a voice, to turn from the suicidal ideology. Steve's been there. He understands what that feels like. And now, because he's had so much courage, gained courage, that he's now excited about sharing his voice, using his voice and sharing his story. I believe Steve's story has inspired other people. I believe that it will inspire many people going forward. The more often he speaks up, the more inspiring he's going to get, and the more impact he's going to make on the life of other people. Is there anyone who disagrees with me? No, I think Steve is a great example of what we can do and why our voice matters. Olivia, you shared, thank you, Steve. Olivia, you shared in the chat a greatest accomplishment. Do you want to voice that to us?
Yes, thank you, Jackie, for the opportunity to share. I'll be entering a new decade of my life, and kind of scary. But then, you reminded me about just reaching back to, when I was in my 20s. That was a brand new decade as well, and I was so fearless at that time. I had worked hard throughout school, and I earned a Fulbright scholarship, this prestigious scholarship, and I went to my birth country, Vietnam. And, that's the power of the word. I can write this essay. And I was interviewed and I was accepted. And here I was going to a country and finding my roots. And I just lost touch with that story. And then, and I lost touch with writing. And so it's just incredible that, maybe that's something I need to return to.
Wow. So
that I had this power in me to create and accomplish, and I did something, and I and it was just a very brave thing to do, and it was against my parents' wishes. They had no idea that I was applying to the scholarship. I didn't tell them about it because I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. And then when I got it, I told them. They were so disappointed that I didn't have a job lined up after school. Or continue on to, you know, pursue a master's or PhD, whatever, that I just went and traveled and volunteered on this Fulbright. And it shocked my parents. It shocked me, but I was okay with it at the time. And now as I entered my adulthood and careerhood, I mean, I felt myself like just always hesitating, being unsure, and then not remembering that I already had that confidence built in for me because I had done that previous work.
Yeah. Wow. You're a rebel. Olivia the rebel. It's like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to make life happen for me. And it's okay that sometimes we set aside some of our creativity in writing because we're taking action. It's okay. We give ourselves permission for that. But there's been a moment in time here when you realize, I need to bring that up again. I need to turn back to my creativity. I need to turn back to my writing. And I have a feeling that that's going to be a top priority for the next little while in your life. And that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice anything else to do that. It just means that you're going to be accomplishing things on a whole different level and for a much clearer purpose. Okay. So that's the accomplishment that makes you heroic in your own life because you are willing to do what's necessary, even if it means going against parents' wishes, listening to your inner voice, and now being inspired to take a different action or some new action to bring another part of you out. And I'm going to tell a story in a little while that will really illustrate why that's important. So thank you so much for sharing that. Maureen, thank you for coming on video. It's wonderful to see your beautiful face.
Hi, sorry. I was eating and then I had a bit of a rest. So, and tomorrow I'm presenting, so I will explain more of why I was resting.
Okay, fabulous. Do you have an accomplishment that you'd like to share?
I do. And it's I feel like first of all, I'm bragging. And second of all, is that all I'm going to do? So I founded the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders. I created a place for millions of people that have rare disorders and their family to come to get information and support. Is that my one and only hurrah? You know, what's next? You know, here I am in my business. During that time, I had some severe health issues and experienced healing. And I want to share that with the world. And then I'm going, is that my last hurrah? And my only?
I would say no. Hello. Thank you so much for using your voice to tell us that so that I and everyone else here can be inspired with your mission and what you're doing for so many people. It's like, you know, the metaphor of throwing a little pebble into the lake and you watching the ripple effect. Well, Maureen, you just thrown a handful of pebbles out into this body of water, and the ripples that are happening are amazing and immeasurable. So no, this is not your one and only hurrah. For heaven's sakes, this hurrah has only begun. It's not even stopped. It's still, the ripples are still going out. And your voice is what's going to give voice to so many people who have, I'm certain, felt ignored, left out, unnoticed, unrecognized. Your voice is going to help them to be seen. Okay. And so, yeah, this is not your last hurrah. I envision wonderful things for you. Now, I look forward to hearing your message tomorrow in a more formal way. And so I know that Olivia and Steve and Maureen are using their voices, and they, through their life experiences, have stories that will be heard by others who will be inspired by those things. It might cause someone to feel differently about something. It might cause someone to have new knowledge about something or believe something differently. It might cause new actions from individuals that will continue that ripple effect that Maureen has already started. Each of us has something to share. we need to recognize the power of our voice. Now, I want you to consider something else, and that is, what is your greatest failure? What is your greatest failure? Because life isn't just all the great things we do. Sometimes those might be harder to see. In fact, when I ask people about their greatest failure, they're like, "Oh, let me start my list." You know, where their accomplishments is, "Oh, well, let me think about that for a minute." But the failures, boy, those come to mind pretty quickly, and I think that's an illustration of human nature, and we need to stop that. However, those failures can be just as inspiring to other people as can be our accomplishments and our wins and our successes. So I want you to think about that for a second. And as you're thinking, I want to share with you, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to share with you one of my greatest failures. And it's something that I regret still to this day, even though it happened when I was 11 years old. I wouldn't call her my best friend, but Debbie, I didn't have best friends. When you're childhood, when you're an abused kid, you just don't make close friends. I just didn't have those connections, but I had friends. I had great acquaintances, and Debbie was one of those acquaintances. She was homely by definition. I think she belonged to a very high religious order. She was required to wear dresses to school every day. She wore a little apron like pinafore. She always said thank you, please, and ma'am and sir. And it was just completely opposite of who I was. My life was survival every day. And so I was a little bit coarse. But she was just kind and mild and meek. And of course, you can imagine how much that opened her up for bullying and criticism and teasing. And I liked Debbie because she was so opposite of me. And so we were good friends. We actually rode the same bus home from school. She would get off at the stop before mine, so I never really knew where she lived. And the bus ride was always fun because we get to catch up with each other at the end of the school day. But there were other girls in the class that were not as kind to Debbie as I tried to be. In fact, Lexi was another girl in our class, and Lexi and we were friends. She would never teased me. There was no animosity. But when Lexi got with her older sister, who was in, junior high or middle school at that time, we'd ride the same buses home because the schools were right next to each other. When she got with her older sister, Lexi just turned mean, just downright mean. And we all rode the same bus home from school. And on this particular day, I was sitting close to the front of the bus with Debbie. I was on the window and Debbie was in the aisle. Lexi and her older sister and a couple of her older sisters, junior high friends, were in the back of the bus yelling obscenities out the window, just being generally obnoxious as they usually were. And as we approached Debbie's stop and the bus began to slow down, Debbie put her foot out in the aisleway to prepare herself to stand up. And as the bus finally stopped and sort of lurched, well, Lexi, who had been coming down the aisle at the same time, when that bus lurched, Lexi tripped on Debbie's foot that was sitting out there in the aisleway. And she fell forward right onto that big old engine on those old school buses in the middle of the end of the hallway where the bus, where the driver sat, and hit her chin on that big engine area. It must have hurt like heck, okay? And when Lexi stood up, she was bleeding from a cut on her chin. And her big sister immediately spit venom in Debbie's face and kind of pulled her off the bus with her. And I thought, I need to get off here too. It wasn't my stop, but I felt like I needed to be with Debbie. And so they pulled Debbie off and I followed. And as soon as the bus driver pulled away, they started beating on Debbie. Lexi and her older sister and their friends shoved the books out of her hand and just literally punched, kicked, spit on her. Anything they could do. And what was I doing? I was paralyzed. I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I stood there and I watched my friend get beat up. The most mild, meek, kind person on the planet that I knew was being devoured by cruelness and meanness. And I did absolutely nothing. And I regret that so much because I knew what that was like. That's what I got at home, and I knew what it was like, and I didn't do anything to stop it. A police car came up. I don't know if someone called it in. The bus stop was in a neighborhood. Someone could have called it in, or it could have just been happenstance, but the police officer took Debbie home. And I didn't know where she lived, and she didn't come back to school the next day, or the next day, or the next day. I never saw Debbie again. I don't know what happened, and I never got a chance to tell her that I was sorry for that happening to her, and that I'm sorry for not stopping it. That is a failure. That is something that now I try to be aware of whenever I see a social injustice, that I don't stand silent. I don't stand paralyzed. I actually do something, whatever's possible, even if it's just using my voice. And so I'm willing to be vulnerable with you there about my greatest fault at that time in my life was letting someone be hurt. I did nothing about it, even though I knew more than anyone what that felt like, and I didn't stop it for someone else. So if you are willing to not necessarily share, I mean, if you want to share your failure, that's okay, but I want you to at least have that in your mind. And I want you to consider something else that I want you to do with that. When I was in therapy, I joined a group of childhood sexual abuse survivors. They were all women. There was 15 of us. And on the first day I walked into this meeting of this support group, I knew 5 of those women. I personally knew 5 of these 15 women, and not a one of us knew that the other one had been going through this healing process from abuse. Ta-da! Okay, that was an eye-opener. The people that you know are going through this stuff, okay? Well, one of those women in this group, her name was Carol. And Carol was a little bit like Debbie was in that she was just downright odd. She never referred to herself as me or I. She would say we. We're hungry. We love dogs, or we love to go camping. It's like, what's okay? Oh, she's married and she has 5 kids. Okay, that's the we she's talking about. No, she was married and she did have 5 kids, but the we she was talking about was her 32 personalities that she discovered while in therapy with us. And many of these personalities would join us in our weekly meetings. Some of them were quite scary. Some of them were infants that were nonverbal. And we would watch Carol physically change and emotionally change during our sessions. In the time that we spent together, Carol discovered how she had these personalities. She was there in this support group because under hypnosis, she learned that at the age of 3, she had been raped and smothered to death by a man she did not see. She saw only his body, but not his face, as he approached her with this pillow, and she died. In hypnosis, Carol recalls her death and her trip to heaven, and that she sat on who she called Heavenly Father's lap. And he told her, this horrible thing has happened to you, but you need to go back, and I'm going to provide helpers for you. and you're going to be okay. In fact, you're going to be strong and kind and good. And Carol believes that these 32 personalities were a gift from her Heavenly Father to help her cope through life. She'd never known any different. Her family didn't know that that's what was wrong with her or right with her, as the case might be. They only knew that their mom was fabulous, and that at whatever occasion came up, she could handle anything. When it was time to cook a fabulous meal, Elizabeth came out, and Elizabeth was a chef. When it was time to play with the kids, then Mary, who was 10 years old, would be there to play with the kids as if she were a child herself. When her husband came home from work a little amorous, well, Desiree, the little hot to trot mistress, came out and solved all his problems, satisfied all his needs. She was the perfect woman, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. However, Carol wanted to be one. She wanted to do what's called integration, where each of those personalities would be integrated back into Carol's core self, whom she really didn't even know. She didn't know who Carol really was. And she allowed us, one of the greatest events of my life, to be there with her in hypnosis as she began to integrate these personalities into her core self. And there is a lesson in what happened with Carol that we all need to be aware of. As you are considering your failures, you need to do what Carol did. Under hypnosis, Carol would see each of these personalities. And by the way, she was a wonderful artist. One of her personalities was an artist and actually drew. She would sketched out every one of these personalities so that we could see who Carol saw. And so Carol would approach, in her mind's eye under hypnosis, each of her personalities one by one. She would hold them by the hands. She would acknowledge who they were, acknowledge what they had done for her in helping her to cope and to heal. She would thank them and show gratitude for the purpose they played in her life. And then she would hug them and say, I got this. I don't need you anymore. You're free to be me. She would do this in several sessions, but what a glorious witness of what each and every one of us needs to do with our voice. That we need to look back at those experiences of our life and we need to say, hey, I acknowledge you for good or bad. I acknowledge what you provided for me. I acknowledge the way you helped me to be me. I acknowledge the way you helped me cope with some of the most traumatic times of my life. I acknowledge how you have made me who I am. And I appreciate you. Thank you. I got this now. Finding our voice is like that. Understanding the experiences we've had in life and the way that those experiences can become stories, like Steve so wonderfully does for people, helps them to acknowledge their stories and bring them to fruition. That is part of finding our voice. It's part of being free from the repressive nature that we've put ourselves in or that someone else has put us in. We have the ability to get out of that. I'm going to share with you a video. This is a scientifically proven meditation of sorts, but it's kind of like a vision board on steroids because you're going to see images of people and places and events that I hope will make you smile. You're going to see affirmations in written form that I want you to say to yourself and internalize as if you were saying them out loud to yourself. And I want you to keep breathing while you watch this. Enjoy the music, which, by the way, this is made for my students, which are children aged 10 to 17. This is made for them. So you'll see representation of children and young people on this video. And they have chosen the music. My students, I did some market research, and my students chose the music for this session. It's called Positive Prime. Positive Prime is this brand new app that's been developed by a woman named Kim Serafini. And I'm so grateful to have made contact with her and be able to be part of her mission to bring positivity in 3 minutes a day to the world. Okay, so scientifically proven, if you watch this for 3 minutes, you get 6 hours of positive effect in 3 minutes. And I use it with my students at the start of all of our classes because I've seen tremendous difference in their ability to engage, to have courage and confidence, and to feel more successful in the projects that they accomplish in our classes and so forth. So let me bring this up for you. And what you're going to see is an example of my gift to you, which is a 10-day free trial of a Positive Prime session. I mean, there's hundreds of sessions by people like Jack Canfield and Sean Johal and Smirnoff. I can't remember her first name, but you're going to see, you'll have 10 days to watch hundreds of different Prime sessions that are categorized with money and abundance and success and wealth and healing and spirituality. This happens to fall into the kids category, but I'm going to give you an opportunity. And when you click on my link to get my gift, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see that it's a gift from Jackie Bailey, and you get to scroll down here and read all about what Positive Prime is and the scientific proof that it provides for you, and that it's going to provide you all this positivity. But for now, I'm going to give you a chance to see my session, 3 minutes of it, realizing that even if you don't keep the trial, if you don't keep the app after the 10-day trial, you still get my session. And when it comes to using your voice, I hope you will watch it every day and empower the way that you're going to use your voice through the day. So here we go. Actually, let me move this around just a tad. Okay. All right. What did you think? I hope you heard the music okay. Do you feel a little more positive? Do you feel a little more empowered with your voice?
I like the one that says, I'm not cantankerous.
I am not cantankerous. In each one of our classes, we have a word a new vocabulary word we introduce in every class. Cantankerous is one of those words. And so our students learn a new vocabulary word every day. And so some of those words are integrated into this session. Let me share
I like
with
that you
you.
put your own pictures in it. Like you put yourself with the quotes into it, Jackie. That was cool to see.
Yeah, thank you. It was a fun project to do, and like I said, I can see the confidence level of my students rise. And let me tell you one more story about a time when I used my voice when I thought I was going to be empowered by it. Turned out a little bit differently. So in 2015, I won a speech competition, and I was going on to the semi-finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking. This is an international contest that is put on every year by Toastmasters International, and it involves 140 different countries who send their representative to a central location, and they compete against each other. So out of 33,000 competitors, as a semi-finalist, I was put into the top 90 competitors, okay? And I had risen to that position by giving a 5 to 7 minute speech about forgiving. And of course, my abusive background was intertwined in that a little bit so that it set, context for how and why I needed to forgive. And I was excited about sharing this story with the world because forgiveness is my mantra. And I was going around and I was practicing this speech to different groups and getting their feedback to help me prepare to give at this semi-final competition. And in one of these opportunities, I was at a hospital, and they had rented out the cafeteria and invited people to come and hear Jackie Bailey give her competition speech on her way to the semifinals. And I did so. And as was customary, we went around the room and everybody gave feedback. Well, this one young man who looked really out of place stood up. It was his turn. And he said, I don't really have anything to say about your speech, but I'm an abuser. And for the first time in my life, I know what my victims go through. What can I say to that? I didn't go beyond the semifinals. But he was the reason I had to give that speech. It wasn't because the world needed to hear it at that time. It was because he needed to hear it. And whoever his victim was, I hope that person's life was changed, as was his. That is why you need to speak. It's not to make money. It's not to be famous. It's not because marketers will tell you that's what you need to do it, but it's because somebody's life is going to be changed because of what you say. You need to use your voice, and you need to be the master of your message. I invite you to be a part of a group. I put on a program called Take a Speaking Quantum Leap and land your authentic message to any audience. We work in a small group of 6 people, and we help you to discover your experiences and turn them into stories so that you can reach that one person who needs to hear what you have to say and change their life and start that ripple effect. I'm going to offer it to you half price between now and July 30th, and it starts next Saturday, July 31st. It's a 6-week program. You're going to explore your purpose. You're going to examine your values, and you're going to extract the how of who you are so that you can begin to brand yourself, to understand who you are and what message you have to give to the world so the world has a chance to hear it. I'll put the link in the chat for you to take a look at what that looks like and to enroll if you would like to. I would love to help you understand how powerful your voice is so that you can move beyond that voiceless victim and become the master of that message, the one person who needs to hear it. Comments or questions? I think my time is about up, but I will be happy to put that in the chat, the link to that.
Thank you, Jackie. That was beautiful so much. And I
Very
don't know if you
beautiful.
know,
Thank you.
I don't know if you know our next guest, who is Brenda Adam. Gosh, I keep mispronouncing your name. I'm sorry.
Edelman. That's all right.
Edelman. But Brenda speaks about forgiveness too, and I think forgiveness is such a powerful force that not only do we have an opportunity to express our story, but we also have an opportunity to listen to other people's stories and to forgive other people for, whatever we have to forgive them for. I think a lot of us have been hurt in terrible ways, but carrying that weight around rather than letting it go can really cost us in ways that we don't really recognize, as you expressed in your speech today. So I'm going to end our recording for now so we can start the next session. I'm also invite everyone who, like me, might need